Welcome to the Mucked Up My Self-Care podcast.
I'm Jill from New York.
And I'm Linda from Tasmania.
We are two moms from opposite sides of the world who are living, demonstrating, and helping moms across the world build their self-care asset bank.
Ready to dive in? Messy, interrupted, imperfect, and most of all mucked up. Let's get going. Hi. Can you believe we are up to episode 21?
This is crazy. I can't believe we even did this to begin with.
Yep. It's feeling like it's just been a blink of the eye. Seriously.
It really has. And we started in May.
Yep.
20.
Gosh.
Right?
Oh, wow. That's insane.
Yeah.
It has felt very coincidental, while also fairly easy and flow. And it's been so good for my self-care. Thank you.
It's like built-in self-care and accountability, and
Yep, I know. So let's start off like we always do, with highs and lows.
Luck highs and luck lows. Let's see. Who's going first? You or me?
I'll go first.
Okay.
Yep. Hi for me. We've had some lovely weather the last couple of days. We haven't had to light the fire, which means winter's slowly drawing to a close. The days are getting longer, more daylight. So that's meant I've done things like walk to school with the kids and walk home with them. I walked home with them and the dog and stuff today, which was really lovely. Chucked a podcast on while I went down to school. So caught up on just some, random fun things for me, like, true crime podcasts are always really, really fulfilling somehow in an eerie sort of way. And even tonight after dinner, we took them all down to the park. We do a little bit of a park in the dark thing.
Nice.
So yeah, we got to do that again tonight after dinner. Cool. Took the soccer ball down and kicked it around and had lots of fun. So yeah. Low. Oh, it's nice to have the high very easy and the low a bit like, what's my low? Had a really productive day and just moments of interruptions, I guess, where my momentum was really, I was concentrating and really in full focus and flow, and sort of those interruptions. They were easier today than other days and other weeks. However, they still sometimes feel like, oh my gosh, I was really on such a good train of thought. That doesn't always come back easily.
I feel that. Oh yeah. No. And then you're off for the rest of it until you can track back on.
I tracked back on pretty easily today. Good. But I know that after today having a really good burst, tomorrow might be a bit floppy. Yeah, that's all. We'll see how we go. What about you?
Oh, okay. Let's see. I think my high is that we had a full weekend of sleepovers between both sets of grandparents and fun activities. Declan went to his first baseball game this weekend, so that was a lot of fun. Slept over his grandparents' house for the first time, my husband's parents, so that was a big to do, and he slept over so well that did so many fun things that he didn't even wake up the overnight, which is always a good sign. So yeah, just lots of fun things from this weekend that just filled my cup a lot. What else? My low. Let's see, what was my muck low, Declan? I think it was coming home with him and the tantrums that ensued after such a fun, stinking weekend. And it was really sweet because last night I didn't want to cook dinner, and I was like, oh, how about we just go out to eat as a family and not do like our usual activity of going to a brewery. It was just like us, the three of us, out to eat for a nice quiet Sunday meal, which did not happen. As soon as we walk in the restaurant, there's arcade games, and that's all he wants to do. And my husband's like, no, come sit down. I'm like, no, let's let him play, because we know we've been through this. You have to let him get it out of his system, and then he'll cooperate, which is what we had to do. And it was great after he had like 5-10 minutes playing with the arcade games, and then came and sat down, ate half a whole burger, surprised the living crap out of me for that one. And then pitched another fit at the table because he wanted to go back and play. So the up and down of like that is just exhausting and embarrassing. And ironically enough, we sat next to our neighbor who has a daughter the same age as Declan. So it was very ironic that we were sitting next to each other. I was like, well, at least the people in this area of the restaurant know exactly what I'm going through right now.
Isn't it funny though? Because sometimes we want that spontaneity, because it's so much of what for me personally as well, what we used to have before kids, once upon a time, seems like a lifetime ago. But then at the same time, it sounded like Declan probably needed a lot of familiarity and routine after such a big weekend. So it's like, well, what do we do here? Do we risk it? Do we?
Exactly. And they need just as much of an on and off ramp as we do. And I think we forget that's a thing for them too, that they just can't switch on and off like we can.
No, and they have much more trouble actually sometimes with the transition between activities. I've known that for a very long time. They need a transition time. They need some warning of, hey, we're having dinner in 15 minutes, in 10 minutes, in 5 minutes. We're having dinner now. And nope.
The alarms and timers have been a help, and the cues that brings has been helpful.
Yeah. And sometimes I'll put on like a podcast. I'll be like, right, at the end of this episode, we're going to do blah, and I'll set the sleep timer on the podcast.
Yeah,
and the kids really love that.
That's
as well.
Good thinking.
Yeah.
Practice that. But here we are, getting all this out on a podcast for everybody else to listen to and think about for themselves too. So this is good self-care for me, a Monday morning and a Monday evening for you that we're recording this on.
every single time. And podcasting's been such a huge part of my self-care and how I chill out and relax, and just it's a little bit of an escape in a way if it's a non-fiction or fiction podcast that I really can sink into and binge on 3 or 4 episodes at once, or well, hardly, but like over a week or so. Sometimes I'd be driving the kids to sleep when they were little, and I'd put a podcast on at the same time. Or if I'm able to walk to school to meet them, I'll put the podcast on for the way down now, and then walk with them back as well. So podcasting has been such a huge component of my life, self-care. Now the kids are listening to podcasts as well. I've had so many friends that I've made from podcasting, like right now. There's just been so many opportunities that have presented themselves from podcasting.
I think that's so cool. And I'm definitely not one to choose a podcast to listen to in my quiet time or anything. So it's a complete opposite thing for me. I really enjoy creating, I guess, the podcast versus listening to the podcasts.
Yeah.
Which is such a odd concept because I don't like to talk a whole heck of a lot either.
I know. I
don't know where podcasting fits in for my self-care at the moment, but it's definitely in this space talking about self-care.
Yeah, it's so relevant though. And it's so interesting how it's unfolded, really, in a way, because all of a sudden we were voluntold, as we say,
Yeah.
as they say. And oh, this would be a great idea. I really think you need to do this together. And here we are, like I said, 21 episodes in.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Mm. Mm.
It
So
was,
good.
it was really nice to do it with my husband when we did it for Mama Outspoken. And we only did a few episodes, but it was good for us communication wise. And
Mm.
like
Mhm.
also processing like what was
Mm.
going on because it was early in Declan's life that we did it.
Yeah.
And processing that whole entire birth journey and everything was kind of like the introduction to the healing of everything that happened.
Mm. Do
So
you
I
think
can see the magic that can come out of the conversation behind a podcast for sure.
mm. Do you think you'll go back and listen for part of your book research stuff?
I probably should
Mm.
to see how, yeah, because I know I'm at a stuck point for the book with the healing chapter. And that is evidence of
Yeah.
that's an
This-
evidence file right there that I can go back to because like I don't have a whole lot that I've journaled about that I thought I
mm.
had. So you are very on point with that one. I'm going to have to go listen to that as my evidence file to include in that now.
Even if it just prompts a few memories or something like that. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's what podcasting also provides. It's a bit of a time capsule and a vault that people don't really appreciate probably sometimes until a bit later on or later into the next phase or stage, or they can listen back to episode 2 and think, wow, we've come a long way since then. Since then as well. So
I
mm,
even think Sundays with oh my gosh, Stories with a Sunday Roast
yeah.
was an evidence file for me from our
Mm,
episode that we did together for that
mm,
I ended up including things from that episode that I wasn't intending in the book. So that was good to have, especially once your book came out. I was like, oh, now I get to remember all the stuff that we talked about. Have to go back and listen to the podcast episode now and be like, oh, I can't believe I actually unintentionally added all this stuff into my book.
mm. What I find really funny is when I wrote that chapter months before we started this podcast, I actually included a line in there which said mucked up
Yeah,
something. Was it mucked
something
up?
up. I can't
Yeah.
remember what it was, but
I'm just trying to see if I can grab it quickly, but it talked about something being mucked up. And I was like, looked at it again when I went to edit and I went, wow,
look at
what a coincidence.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that chapter for me was such an honor to be able to just try and capture some of your journey and story in there too, because it's really special to me as
Hmm.
well. Yeah. Mm. Mm. Um, so you don't really have a chance to listen to podcasts or anything like that. Um, I'm wondering what you think this experience has. Why has it worked so well, do you think, this time? Why has it felt so easy and flow?
Oh, um, hmm. I think we're we're talking about things that we're not necessarily experts in, but we have the experience in. We're living it. It's things that are
Mhm.
happening currently around us. There's no having to do research and present
Yeah.
it. It's life. It's us
Mm.
just chatting it out and figuring it out where it comes just super naturally, I think.
Yeah.
And sure, there's history between us that was a friendship growing
Mm.
already, but this has put us in a position that it accelerated that growth between us because we're coming together on a common spot between the two of us, even though our journeys are so different. We have such different, obviously, locations.
Other
Um,
side of the world.
and everything that
Like,
comes with that, plus the amount of children we
mhm.
both have, our history of life as well. It's so,
Mm.
I'm not going to say opposite, but we're so different. No more. Yet we
Mm.
have that same connection of motherhood and self-care.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And in thinking about that as well, I think this has never been a podcast where we want it to be really heavy or want it to be necessarily facts and figures and data and all the rest of it. Well, there's a time and place for that, and I don't think it should be eliminated completely. We're very much wanting to describe a lot of our own journey and what that's meant for us and what that looks like, and be able to fill the asset bank for both us and for others that are listening as well. So that's been such an intention from the beginning, and I think it's still an intention now as well.
I agree with you completely. And I think some of the feedback that we get from it is that we're saying the things that people are thinking and don't say out loud, and they're glad somebody is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mm. And that's so important because words really do change worlds, because without the conversations in the first place, we can't have an understanding of it. Without listening to other people try and talk it out, we can't have an understanding of it. And without understanding, there's not going to be a way to then move forward and find possible solutions or ways to get better, or unravel our own mucked up ways that we're doing things and being okay with that. Finding out what works for you, what works for me, and all the other stuff in between as well. So yeah, yeah, just try to make it as understandable as possible as well.
Yes. Yeah. Because I know not having the best self-care, we can get really muddled up in that. Getting our point
Yep.
across and
Mhm. As she's trying to say, like, get out of the dog food. Don't pull the cat's tail. Like, leave me alone. I'm trying to record, she says. Oh, such a funny thing. Yep. Mm. As far as podcasting as well as a self-care measure for me, I think sometimes podcasting itself has helped me then to, it's done things like help me create a flexible job, a flexible working environment, and help others to have conversations, which is something I'm very passionate about as well. And all those sort of things like that. Mm.
I like the therapeuticness of like having to a set meeting to come to this, the process
Mm-hmm.
we have behind recording, like
Yep.
figuring out what we're going to talk about, like having it all set up ready for us to go and getting us in that zone before we even need to, or we just get to follow the path, like the flow of what we're talking about. But
Yep.
then the work that comes around it, like you said, like that's just the flexibility. You get to take an episode then and work on it, and when it's ready, it gets scheduled, and if you can do a few at a time and a bulk batching kind of a thing. It's like, all right, like you said earlier to me before we even started doing this, you had a block of time that opened up and you
Yeah.
were able to get a bunch of work done. So that flexibility of
Mhm.
having just an hour and a half just to get a whole bunch of things fit in there real quick
Yeah.
can fill your cup, first of all, because the feeling of getting accomplishment in something that turned
Mhm.
a little bit differently for your day. Um, yeah.
Podcasting with children on our lap.
Yep.
Real raw, unedited, all that fun stuff.
Interruption with flexibility. Yeah. Huge self-care option for us. Um,
Yeah.
because
Exactly.
we have the ability to batch these things and not necessarily always do them live. Streaming gives us that ease to have fun with it, and instead of it feeling so much like an unnecessary pressure, which was what this was all about to begin with, is to make it unnecessary pressure for us, and not unnecessary pressure for us. Yeah. And just something fun for us to do that we knew would impact others.
Exactly. Yeah, so good. And I wanted to just chat quickly as well about the whole Stories with a Sunday Roast project, because that's been a beautiful springboard for this type of thing. And it's where our conversation started developing further. And I found out more about you. You found a little bit more about me. Then it developed into the massive project of the book as well, which has been fulfilling in all sorts of different ways for me. So Stories with a Sunday Roast will always, I think, have a really dear place in my heart, for lots of different reasons.
It's
as
a
well.
humongous and special project. The storytelling that you do with your guests in that podcast brings out these, well, they may not be something that everybody feels they want to listen to. They are so captivating that you get drawn into this other world story and get lost in someone else's experience. And it's so beautiful the way that you are able to bring that out for other people. And I will say it's the most easy listening I've done, and that I've cried at every single episode that I was able to listen to so far because of the eloquence of the conversation. It nothing to do with me, any of them, except my one that I was honored to be a part of. But every single one has touched my heart in a different way.
Thank you. Yeah.
It's so cool that you're able to do that with everybody. And I think that is the power behind a podcast, is that you have that opportunity to bring magic to somebody in that way, just with words and hearing someone else's voice.
I feel like it's a really different sort of way to be. Essentially, it's a lot like journalism in a way, but I think a little bit more personal or authentic in a different aspect of that. I probably hadn't thought of myself as more of the journalistic type of avenue until fairly recently, but then listening to others and thinking about their journalist career and what that has actually meant, I'm like, wow, well, that's quite similar in some ways to what I'm doing. I really love the writing process. If I could write all day, I probably would. However, it takes a long time.
Oh, yeah.
As you're finding out. Especially if you want to put expression and sort of lyrical poetry type of approach in there, which I like to try and do a little bit of. It's not just take the transcript and there it is. So it's been such such an enjoyable experience. And like I said, such a springboard for this. So I thank you for this episode and many more previous in the future, past, present, future, and all the rest of it.
We're not going to stop here. That's for sure, Linda.
No way. So until next week.
We hope you can unstuck your muck.
Bye. Bye-bye.